Hello, welcome to my channel. Since the last video where I was comparing the 50-500 with a 100-400L Canon, I decided for extra sharpness I'd buy a Sigma 120-300 f2.8, and I've been using this with the 5D Mark IV and also the R6, getting absolutely brilliant results even with a 2x extender. But I decided I wanted more cropping power, so I went and bought an R5. That might have been a mistake. With the R5, the Sigma just doesn't want to know. It will get sharp pictures, but you might shoot in burst mode and get 1 in 5 that are any good. Now, obviously, the lens wasn't a problem. It's working perfectly well on the R6 and on the 5D Mark IV. But despite serious discussion with both Sigma and Canon, they couldn't think of any reason why I wasn't going to get sharp pictures all the time. Well, I can. Canon doesn't want you to buy Sigma lenses. Now, the video I'm doing is about wild birds, small birds in the Forest of Dean. So we'll look at that, and I'm popping in stills taking on the various cameras to give you some idea of what's going wrong, or right, as the case may be. So, video shot on the R5, and I can take stills at the same time, or not. I've done very little sharpening, a little bit of cropping for necessary. But I don't want to over sharpen, so you can say, oh, it's not as good as the Canon. So now I've bought a Canon 100-400L Mark II. Let's see what it can do. This is shot in the Forest of Dean, sitting in a car 5 to 10 feet from the subject. I apologise if some of the clips are a bit short. These birds can sometimes move faster than you can blink. Now, both locations are small car parks where people often put up birdseed. I'm also guilty of attracting the odd bird in, but I have placed the majority of the seed out of sight, either in a groove, hollow, or just over the curve. The odd seed I can remove in Photoshop, even if it's in a beak, but a massive heap is rather tiresome. For those of you familiar with the Canon R5, I shoot quite frequently using the crop mode. You can also do video in crop mode, so you can sort of get even closer. But the disadvantage, of course, is when and they're moving in and out. It's if you're too close in, there's just no chance of panning in or anything like that. But it's all a learning curve, a bit like me in doing videos. I hope you don't find this video too long, but the classical music should help. I struggled a little with the still images. I didn't want them to be hanging in the screen for too long. If you have trouble reading the EXIF, you could always pause the video, but it's more about the image than the data. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't done any significant sharpening, so there shouldn't be any bias. I had a Sigma 120-300 years ago, but it was stolen. But as I was aware of the quality, I was quite happy to get another, second hand of course. As it's f2.8, it takes an extender in its stride. According to DxOMark, who test all kinds of lenses, it resolves a lot more detail than the Canon 100-400L2 and a little less than the 70-200 f2.8L lens. Right, this video is primarily to showcase the wildlife. The issue with the R5 is rather incidental. I can use the Sigma quite happily on the 5D4 and the R6. Under the guidance of Canon, I shot in RAW and used their software, the DPP4, to verify where the focus point was. Using an animal eye autofocus, the circle was over the eye, just out of focus, as with obvious on the initial picture of the grey wagtail. I was getting crisp images, but not all the time, unacceptable in the real world. With all the furore over the third-party RF lenses at the moment, I think Canon may be trying to recoup development costs, which may be why the RF 100 to 500 is so expensive. This belief was reinforced when the price of the EF 100 400L2 was bumped up by 400 quid. I picked mine up second hand for a mere 1200 quid, bargain. I will try and put a link in the YouTube text about my previous video, which was a comparison between the Sigma 50 to 500 and the Canon 100 400L2. I was looking for a little more sharpness. In most cases the Sigma was perfectly acceptable, despite being derided by an awful lot of people. Now you've had time to look at the small birds, I can say in my own opinion, both the Sigma 120-300 f2.8 and the Canon R5 are great pieces of kit, just not together. But the R6 manages to cope for some reason, so what went wrong with the R5 we may never know. I'm hoping that later on, when Canon have recouped a bit, they will do a firmware patch that will solve the problem. I went mirrorless for the animal eye autofocus. The DSLR was often focusing on the shoulder of a bird rather than the eye. It just hasn't had a good field test yet. The British climate and the price of fuel don't help either. To wind things up, please feel free to leave comments. As I'm not being sponsored by anyone, I have no bias other than by the equipment I already have. One thing is set in stone: moving with the times costs a lot of money. Only certain advances like self-cleaning sensors and animal eye autofocus are seriously beneficial to improving our image quality. Feel free to leave comments, subscribe, follow, whatever we do on these sort of strange media, and hopefully I'll be producing another one not too far into the distant future. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.